So this is the moment I was waiting for, not because this is the end of the day, but in front of us we have a great talk between two great people. One of them is Jeff Moss, the co-founder of DevCon and Black Hand, and the second one is father of Oh My Hack, editor-in-chief of Zaufana Trzecia Strona. So I'm inviting them to the stage. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hi there.
They are showing.
Fantastic orange suit, by the way.
Thank you. I try to be in the same color as part of the logotype that we have. So you are showing us that it's a true international event, as Jeff is currently based in Singapore, as I remember, and Adam is in Warsaw, so it's a huge distance. But this is like the advantage of the pandemic, that we are able to connect via different tools. But this is also the moment I would like to tell about, that this is the moment when maybe it's the time to grab a phone call or make a Zoom call and call your friends, whether there is everything okay with them, whether they don't need any help, or they might suffer because pandemic is very tough to all of us. So that might be a good opportunity to use the cell phone, go through the phone book, and call some of our friends. They might need our help. The stage is yours, guys. So I am giving you the mic, and I am looking forward to the interview.
Hey, thank you. Jeff, it's our honor to have you here. And we want to use that opportunity to get some answers for some really important questions about hacker culture. And you chose the topic because we believe you are in a unique position to explain things to us, because you've been observing, we've been watching, you've been taking part in this hacker culture for a really long time. I don't want to count how old are you, but I think we can safely say that it started at least about 30 years ago, and you organized the first DEF CON where 100 attendees arrived. And now, assuming everything will happen as we hope it will, you can, if not for the pandemic, you could have counted for like 30,000 probably, if you keep the growth rate. And these are two different times, two different epochs. And if you look back at how the hacker culture looked 30 years ago and how it looks today, and what do you think was the things that stayed with us, and what changed the most over the last period?
That's a really open-ended question, so you're going to have to rein me in because I could talk about this for quite a while. But yeah, you're right. The origins for me, I was what was considered a new school hacker back then. Now I'm considered old school, but I was new school in the sense that I had a bulletin board and I had a dial-up modem. And I was an outsider trying to connect into the universities and connect into X25 and the internet TCP/IP networks. And so for me, my youth was sort of obsessed with gathering knowledge. I ran a bulletin board and I collected text files on hacking and phreaking. And there was no search engines, there's no Yahoo or AltaVista or anything. And so it was all about who you knew, who could teach you. And you would spend all your time trying to find a mentor or somebody who could teach you on how, and along the way, there's landmines everywhere. And you could step on a landmine and end up in trouble, or your parents could find out you're doing something you shouldn't be. So it was a lot about who you knew, and it was a lot about questing for information. And at the end of the day, you did all that. Now you had the information. You still needed to have access to a computer just to even do something. And over the last 30 years, that's all completely flipped. Right? It's the opposite of that almost. YouTube, everything. AltaVista gone, but you have Google, you have Bing, you have other search engines. So it's essentially the knowledge is free now, where I spent all my time seeking it. It's still a problem. You still have to find people maybe to be a mentor, but YouTube is sort of your virtual mentor. And so computers are free. Bandwidth is free. All the things I did are free now. And that means it's more important for you to figure out, well, now that information is free, what are you going to do with it? Like, what is your motivation? For me, it was finding the sacred knowledge, knowing something other people didn't know, making computers do things that they weren't supposed to, getting access to phone networks. But essentially, a lot of that is not as important anymore. And the big revelation for me when this changed was the dot-com boom, late 1990s, early 2000s, when money came in. And when money entered the scene, it was a job, right? The companies had something they wanted to protect. The only people out there with surplus that weren't already working at a bank or the military or a hospital or something were essentially enthusiasts, us, hackers. So we all got jobs. And now you went from being sort of creative when you wanted to, hacking when you wanted to having to show up for a job at 9 to 5. And that's a different mentality. And this created a lot of tension in the hacking scene. So anti-sec movement started. People were called sellouts. People had their mail spools taken and dumped because they're working for the man now. They're not true hackers, and a lot of animosity through those years.
Well, you've been talking about the access to knowledge. This is a very interesting topic because, well, I've also been raised in the times where we had no access to anything. Well, I had to pay for my own phone bills just to get some grabs of the internet. Or I remember running with hard drives around the friends' houses to get a copy of the internet, which meant actually the temporary internet files folder. And then manually reconstructing websites they've been visiting and hoping they did not visit something ugly. And but today we have everything. And does it make us better? Does it make this community better? Was it even like a default setting now? But before we had to put a lot of effort to become hackers, to become IT security experts. Today, isn't it too easy? Doesn't make those people like less worthy?
Less worthy? Well, I'd say it's different. So, for example, when we were hacking, when my generation was hacking, there was very little at risk. We could go crazy and we could not do very much harm because there was nothing at risk. There was no banks really, there's no online retail, there's no private PII, none of that stuff was online. So the worst you could do is maybe you down a site, but it's not a critical site and it wasn't like full of customer data or something. But now it's totally different, right? You can actually cause a lot of harm as we've been seeing over the last decade. And so I think in that first exploration phase, I mean, we had the freedom just to discover and roam and question everything. And computers were simple. And there was only a few programming languages. And you could understand how the phone system worked. And you could understand how Unix worked, or Sonos or whatever. And you could develop, if you could program in Pascal and C++, you kind of could program anything. And now that's not the case. And so it's a reflection of how important it's become, because now you need hackers or people with the hacking mindset. You need them in policy to inform policymakers. You need them in business to tell the business decision makers, oh no, don't do that. Don't put your data center in China. Don't make this other server installation in a certain way. Medical, implantable medical devices. You need security specialists. Smart cars, security specialists. Smart locks, security specialists. And so 20 years ago, you didn't need all these specialists because locks were locks and cars were cars, airplanes were airplanes. And because software has eaten the world needs more security people, hardware, physical, software security people. So I would say that it's like I'm astounded as you are that I started with 100 people coming to DEF CON, and the last time we did it in person, we had 30,000. Like, I don't understand that. Where are all these people coming from? And you look around and there's artists, there's musicians, there's writers, there's hardcore developers and hardware engineers and aerospace engineers. And I mean, everybody is interested. And when you start digging into it, it's, I think, because the hacking mindset is sort of universal. It's not specific just to a certain operating system or mobile platform. It's people wanting to sort of peel back this layer in the world and look underneath it and say, well, they tell me this is how the world works, but it really works like this. and they look underneath. And I think that's what's going on. And so every year I'm curious, is this the year that we've reached the maximum? So for example, when DEF CON started, there was 3 conferences besides DEF CON in the United States that were public that I knew of. Now there's hundreds, there's thousands around the world. So sooner or later, the amount of people that want to learn is going to match the amount of conferences there are, and we'll all kind of top out. Like there's only so many doctors in the world. Doctors just don't keep growing and growing. So at some point we'll top out. And when we do, that will be a giant like epoch moment, right? The community is about as big as it's ever going to get. And then I have a feeling we're going to start really introspecting about what we really want to do as a community. But as we're constantly growing and churning and learning more, I think we're a lot more outward focused. And I think that's a really good thing, because if you look at like what happened with, say, the railroads in America, once a lot of the innovation occurred in the railroads and the rail was laid and the different optimizations in the steam engines and 125 engine providers, 125 railroads consolidated down to like 6 or so pretty quickly. And then regulation came. And so we're not at that big regulation, big consolidation phase yet, but I do worry at some point if that will occur. Same route as radio, same route as television. Will the same thing happen to us? Or is the internet so dynamic and hackers are just such free thinkers that we're going to work our way around whatever problem comes our way? You censor the main internet, we'll use Tor. You somehow censor Tor, we'll invent something else. But I think it is a different world today. But it just, the mindset, wanting the right to repair, right to be forgotten, privacy, all these things are just even more in the forefront and more important.
I think you've mentioned 2 very important things. One is that we need people with the correct mindset to become hackers. You just don't become a hacker just by wanting to become one. If you define hacker by the mindset that one must have, then there's a limited number of people that can become those hackers.
Right.
Understood like that. But on the other hand, we've been surrounded by technology, and the technology needs people who will secure it. And if the supply does not equal the demand for those people, then we stay with security, and with no security for the technology that we're actually using, which sounds like a catastrophe coming. But my question is, can you imagine teaching people the hacker mindset? Is it something that one is born with, or can we somehow influence the education of younger generations to make more hackers because we need them?
I think that's a good question. I would say there's it's like you can be a natural musician, or you can work really hard at being a musician and still be a musician, but maybe not a virtuoso. I think it's the same in hacking, especially in information security. In the InfoSec world, I don't think you have to be a naturally talented super hacker. You can be a really solid type A, attention to detail person and totally beat up attackers who are trying to break into your company because you have this attention to detail and you can think of new ways to defend your system. But I think the hacking, I always say, is sort of like it's a mindset and it's a skill set. You have to have both. And people have sort of misappropriated that and used that to also assign motivation, criminal motivation or altruistic motivation. And I always try to say, no, criminal hacker or a good hacker. I don't use hacker to apply one or the other. To me, it's like a skill set. Like I know some people that are fantastic hackers. I would never let them touch my network because I don't trust them. But they're fantastic hackers, right? They think creatively and laterally. And I think what's happening though is the current education system has very limited ways of trying to encourage that. You can see in Korea, they spent a lot of time. There's a program there called Best of the Best, where it's an alternative sort of university structure where they definitely build better hackers, right? They have a whole curriculum. They spend a lot of time, years and years building this, and they get fantastic results. A couple of years ago, they won DEF CON CTM. Now they had to filter the students and get the ones with the right mindsets, but you can absolutely do that. Just like FIFA finds great football stars, or in China they find great talent for, the opera or whatever it is. But in America, luckily we've been pretty forward leaning in this in the area of contests, capture the flag contest. So there's the National Cyber Collegiate NCCDC Defensive Challenge. More defense oriented, but it's a college competition. And that allows all these college students to organize and compete. Seeing the success of that, they moved it one level down, they moved it to the high school level, because it turned out college is too late to try to attract talent. Now they're at the high school level, and they're realizing high school might be a little too late. And they're trying to move it down to even younger, right? Capture the people that are interested earlier. And I was in Washington, D.C., and I was at an event where there's an administrator for this large university system. And it was a wide-ranging discussion about some of these issues. And I just remember this administrator said something pretty bold. He said, I want my university within 10 years to be in the top 5 cyber programs in America. And within 5 years, I want to be in the top 10. And then by 10 years, I want to be in it. And I said, that's pretty competitive. I mean, CMU and some of the other universities, they're not going anywhere, MIT. So there's really very little space for you to compete in there. How are you going to teach offense? Because if you can't teach offense in university, you can't really teach true defense. And you'll be teaching people sort of the shadow of reality if the students don't understand what the attacker does. And the administrator, to his total credit, he thought about it, put on this really serious face. You could see all these gears and calculations and everything going on. And then he said, maybe not in the top 10. And he realized that asking a large university system to teach offense to college kids, that was too far. They couldn't do that. And that's really telling.
Yep, there's some limit, but I like very much your analogy with football. Like in Europe, we have football schools that 3, 4, 5-year-olds go to, and then if they want to follow the career, they go for every stage, and the best are picked by the best clubs, and they play, and they are trained by the best, and it's just the same system we need to implement as for cybersecurity. I like looking at the Israeli model, which is a lot of militarized, but it works. They also pick children at the college level, and then when they join the ranks, they get the option. You get the training from the best, and then you stay a few years and train the rest. And we can see the results, like the influence of Israeli companies on the industry. It works. It just needs to be organized. So I understand the hope is not lost. We can do something about it.
Yeah, I think it's you're going to be competing with all the other new shiny things out there. So AI and ML, big data. That's where so there's a saying a long time ago that I forget who had the saying, but it was an observation that essentially in the 18th century, all the best minds, brightest minds went to politics. That was the biggest thinkers, the largest concepts. And then they went to Wall Street. And that was where the money was, and these new inventions and derivatives and stocks. And that was where all the awesome excitement was. You could make your fortune, you could change the world through finance. And then it was Silicon Valley, right? That's where you could change the world. That's where you could do everything. And I think it's starting to change again. And so when the best minds in the world are figuring out how to optimize click-through, that is a waste of talent. Like nobody wants that to be their legacy, that they optimized click-through or saved 1,000th of a millisecond on some network path, right? You want to be changing the world. So I think other technology-enabled areas, the hacking mindset are going to move into biotech or nano or genetics, or you see the space race explosion. Who doesn't want to be a space hacker? I mean, that's like radio, that's embedded, that's programming, that's physics, it's a lot of exciting, sexy things to do. And it's a greenfield opportunity right now. And so I think you're going to have this core hacker mindset and some core networking, developing, AppSec and then hackers are just going to go and we're going to infect everything, and hopefully we're going to infect everything with our love of discovery. And I think hackers, to me, a true hacker admits their failures, and they can really reflect on why they failed and improve. Don't assign blame. They can help other people. Like, they love to share knowledge. These are the hallmarks of true good hackers. And even in hacking groups back in the 80s or 90s, if you looked at it, a lot of those hacking groups spent a lot of time writing hacking text files and sharing them online. It's like they weren't getting paid to do that. They just loved telling the world about how this new clever thing is that they discovered. And I think we see the same thing today. We see some hackers that will find a 0-day in an iPhone, and it's worth, say, $2 million. And they don't go and sell it for $2 million. They release it for free. And so even at $2 million, I think some hackers look at their options and they say, no, I'm going to share this knowledge. And I think those are sort of hallmarks of really good hackers.
We need more people like that. Unfortunately, this is not something I think we can teach them, but if there's enough hackers, we'll find the good ones. But I listened to a few of your interviews, and I found one from 97, and you said a nice phrase there: if you want to get a job, don't call yourself a hacker. Do you think it's changed?
Yeah, I think it's probably changed now. And so what that was about is in 97, right there during the dot-com boom, it was really confusing for me because I had my phone, and in my phone, my Nokia, right, I had all my hacking buddies' handles and their disposable numbers or their pagers or whatever, and I didn't know their real name. I didn't know their real name for like a decade because I didn't need to know their real name. And all of a sudden now, there's people that say they know me. John Williams says he knows me. I'm like, well, who the hell is John Williams? And then they'll like whisper in your ear their hacker handle. And you're like, oh, you're John. So your Rolodex, your phone address book had to double in size. Now I had to remember twice as many names. I had to remember their hacking handle name, and I had to remember their real name. And so you get in these situations where people are trying to get real jobs, and they're trying to pretend they weren't hackers, and they are now security professionals. And so in public, we were all security professionals. But in private, we were all still hanging out, still being hackers. And I think this started to change when Hollywood really got involved. And so it kind of went from no hackers portrayed anywhere to super fantastical hackers to slightly more realistic hackers to now every TV show has a resident hacker. And a lot of times it might not be very realistic. It's just the hacker character is there to move the plot along. I need to find the car. Ask the hacker. The car is on 3rd Street. Okay. It just moves the story along. But they're normal now. Hacker is normal. And there's been plenty of instances of, good and bad hackers. And so, Facebook is on one hacker way. And Silicon Valley's really embraced the term hack. And now we have life hacks and body hacks and food hacks. It's gone to a ridiculous extreme. But I remember in those early days when the press took over the term hacker and was using it to mean computer criminal, there was a big debate online, at least in the Usenet groups. Do we rename ourselves? And this is kind of funny because there was a concerted effort for a while to rename ourselves crackers. The criminals are crackers, or we're crackers and the bad guys are hackers. And some people raised their hands and they said, there's already a group of people called crackers. They're the people, the software pirates that reverse engineer and remove copy protection. But because the reverse engineers didn't talk to the pirates, the pirates and reverse engineers didn't talk to the hackers, they were in two different worlds. It was like the phone freaks and the pirates, and then there were the hackers. And okay, we can't do that. How about spiders? We'll call them spiders. And then Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web. And we're like, oh, the web, spiders, that's a little corny. We're not doing that. And then it just kind of went back to hackers.
I don't want to start a third world war talking on over what hacker means. It happens, I think, in every group of people interested in IT security. Everybody has their own opinion, and I haven't heard the spiders, but crackers versus hackers is a
Yeah, spiders
going
is
fight.
pretty short-lived, but it's fascinating how hacking terminology has infected everything, right? You're a noob. Well, where did noob come from, right? As a hacking, 0-day, a lot of this terminology, getting pwned, is like all hacker terminology that is mainstream now, mostly taken by the gaming culture, but really a lot of it all came from the online hacking scene.
From what you mentioned, I think we need more Hollywood. We need more Hollywood to make more people attracted to hacking, and to improve the image of the hacker group, and to get more people into it. We need to influence them somehow.
I was one of several technical advisors to the TV series called Mr. Robot, and that was one of the first portrayals, I think, of a hacker that really, besides the hacking, right? The hacking was technically accurate, but the time scale was totally inaccurate, right? So we spent a lot of time making sure that everything they did was totally 100% accurate, except instead of showing 2 months of recon and planning, it like happened in an afternoon, right? Because who's going to wait and have the character work on something for 2 months?
That would be fascinating. Let's make a movie like that.
Yeah, it takes forever. But the point I was getting at is, in that role, the main character, Elliot, was really flawed, right? He had mental issues, he had substance abuse issues, and he reminded me more of some of the people I knew in the hacking world, right? Like complicated, conflicted, holding opposite views in his mind at the same time. And so I thought, okay, if they can start, if a show like that can be popular, showing the complicated, flawed hacker, hoping to see more complex hacking characters.
Well, I need to thank you in the name of all the hackers watching this movie that it was technically correct, because it made it possible to actually enjoy it. Because there's no worst thing than looking at somebody pretending to be a hacker on screen.
Yeah, there's
so thank you.
If you look at the very first season 1, episode 1 of Mr. Robot, and you look closely when there's racks of computers, you'll see that there's only like 1 or 2 computers, and the racks are mostly all. The technical advisor, Cora Donna at the time, was like, absolutely not, we're not doing that again. And after that first episode, if you saw a room full of computers, all the racks were full of computers. Like, there's no more faking, sort of that attention to detail, which ADD hackers appreciate.
Yeah, we did. Okay, now a little word about black hats. How it changed over time, because it fascinates me. I know a lot of people in the industry and in other industries and in very reputable companies holding very senior positions that used 20 or 25 years ago to deface websites, DDoS friends from IRC channels, and do many bad things. And actually, they don't boast about their times right now, but everybody in the industry knows they are those nicknames that used to do things like that. And they were black hats before. But they are respected now, they are white hats, and they're fighting the bad hackers. But if you took any real bad hacker today, like, I don't know, a ransomware actor, and he came to you and told you, well, I want to get a job at your company, you would be totally afraid of just talking to him or even letting him into your building.
Right.
And 20 years ago, bad people, black hats, are today acceptable as white hats. Why? Because they didn't steal from people. They stole from, I don't know, corporations, because they stole time, they stole CPU usage, etc. What changed in the perception of the black hat?
I think probably a number of things. One is the laws changed. When I was hacking into stuff, there was actually no law against it. There was a law that was basically modeled after the ham radio laws of look but don't touch, right? The damage was in touching. So if you change something on somebody's computer system, that was tampering, and then you could get in trouble for that. But you could look. The law didn't make a whole lot of sense, because you could potentially look at really sensitive stuff, but that's the way it was. And then laws changed because they got abused. you couldn't get in trouble for software piracy because there was no economic harm. And then I remember some guy set up a huge, massive bulletin board, pirated everything, took it way too far. It wasn't for personal use. It was clearly something else. And they got arrested and went to court. And out of that came these anti-piracy laws because somebody took advantage of it. So sort of the same thing. The laws adapted, and you could look the other way when there was nothing at risk and there's no harm done, I think. And it was sort of youthful exuberance, right? Exploring. But it's hard to make that argument now when you could say, well, you take down a server in a multi-tenant environment, you might impact 30 other sites, right? You go and you DDoS your buddy, ha ha ha. But in doing that DDoS, you might wipe out 100 other sites on the Amazon instance. And one of those sites might be a hospital. Like, you don't know. And so now you're causing all this collateral harm, where before you couldn't cause collateral harm because there was no cloud, there was no shared computing like that. And so I think just the capability to accidentally or intentionally do harm is much greater. And also, I think you can't claim that you didn't know. I mean, growing up now, you know what you're doing, right? And so I think 25 years ago, it's a little different than today. And so if there was a ransomware author today that wanted to work at my company, no. I don't know who would hire them. So they better keep their identity secret, because otherwise they'll never have a way to get out of the criminal underworld. They'll be trapped in the criminal underworld forever, and they'll be a black hat forever, right? And I would hope that they would have a strategy that if the heat is on or they decide they want to change their ways, there's a way for them to get out. And I've seen some black hats that have sort of two identities. They have their black hat hacking identity they don't tell anybody about, and then they have their sort of corporate day job. And they're hacking on the side for extra money or because they think it's glamorous or it's exciting. And that goes great until something happens and the streams get crossed. And then
Brian Krebs writes an article.
Right, until Brian comes calling, right? And it's extra confusing now, because back in the day, you were pretty much knew who you were dealing with. Oh, that's Dark Knight or whatever. I'm dealing with Dark Knight. But now there's so many false flags. There's so many other governments involved. There's corporate security impersonating people. There's security companies paid to create fake personalities online. I mean, unless you meet somebody in person and follow them around for a year, you're not sure who you're really dealing with. And so that makes trusting and creating sort of a hacking group that much harder, because how do you create, that trust? So yeah, it's a different game. And the ability to screw up now is tenfold. In the early days, you didn't have always on mobile phones to give up your location or accidentally do something. It was like you could go to a house somewhere, you could tap into some phone lines, do your computing, and walk away. And there was no doorbell security cameras, and like it was so much easier back then. Nowadays, you have to be like a professional James Bond just to hope to get away with it if anybody starts looking. Look at what Bellingcat's doing, exposing Russian, poisoning squads. You think you're going to evade that if somebody, you take a gas pipeline offline on the east coast of America and you think you're going to hide?
But you can still hide east of Poland and just stay there and don't go to holiday anywhere except for the
exactly. I mean, they might figure out who you are, but now you can't go anywhere.
Yeah, that's the only thing that makes me happy.
Yeah.
I want to look at the hacker culture from another perspective, because this is something as also a conference organizer I've been fighting with, but probably not fighting, but trying to fight with, is that we have both sides. We have blue teams, we have red teams. Sometimes we have also purple teams, but in general, there are attackers and defenders, and both parts are important. Sometimes people argue that even defenders are more important than attackers, but in general, when you go to a con and you look at the crowd and how they are more cheering the attackers than the defenders. Attack is sexy. This is simple. And you always get more people to watch a clever attack than a clever defense. And is this something that's actually embedded in the culture of this professional group, or where does it come from?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things going, because we all think about the same thing, right? Like, what is going on here? And part of it, I think, is that it's exciting. Part of it too is that defense is really, really hard, and you don't necessarily know when you're succeeded at defense. So, like, for example, our DEF CON website, our DEF CON servers, we get attacked all the time. But probably, I don't know, it's probably mostly automated. It's probably mostly bots scanning the internet looking for known vulnerabilities, right? It's probably not a whole lot of super secret state actors coming after us. So yeah, we're being attacked all the time, but we're not really being attacked, like intentionally targeted. And so do I count those as a successful defense? At what point do I say, we're with attack? I attack, I break in, I get a shell. I have succeeded, right? It's the feedback loop is very tight. If I fail, I don't get a shell. If I succeed, I get a shell. Right? But on defense, what's my feedback loop? I don't have one really, unless I'm constantly always looking to see if every log I have, every indicator of compromise, everything. And even then, I have to be a little suspicious. So I think the feedback is awesome and the reward is right then. And in defense, I might defend against you, but I might not know what I did to keep you away. Is it because I obfuscated my Apache server number? Like, what did I do that prevented you? So I think there's that going on. I think also a lot of people, and we don't like to admit this, but going to a conference is really viewed sort of as a reward, right? You go to a conference, it's social, it's fun, gets your mind out of work, it makes you think in different ways. It's almost like a vacation, sort of, and like a hobby vacation. And so people are looking for stuff to do there that is exciting to them and helps them do things they don't do normally in their day job. And so if they can see a new exciting attack in an hour, or sit down and learn some new defensive technique that takes 3 days, right? They're going for the quick, exciting thing. And so I'm not sure if it's really just 100% that attack is sexy. I think in conferences, defense is also hard to show. So I think, a number of things. And also I think the nature, the social nature of InfoSec versus hacking, I think that's something that we really need to acknowledge. They're different things. You're teaching different skill sets, sort of. And so the world is full of InfoSec conferences. The world used to be full of hacking conferences. Then they became InfoSec conferences. And I blame myself largely for that because of Black Hat, success of Black Hat. And that's fine. You can have both kinds. But I really would encourage for people to think about, well, what would a hacking conference be like? What's different? And because for an InfoSec conference, you need skills that the attendees can be better at what they need to do to perform at their job. Come back, they've had a bunch of beers, they've heard stories, seen old friends, but they also now know the new thing, 5 new things to try, 2 new tools to avoid, and 1 new tool to buy. But at a hacking conference, it's not about upskilling yourself for maybe a company, whatever, enterprise EDR solution. It's more about, how do I approach a problem? Or how do I discover something new? Or, boy, I really want to get into 3D printing. And it's about feeding that innate curiosity, I think, right? That hacker core skill set. And that's what I want to try to do, is encourage, how do you feed that hacker side? Because there's unlimited commercial opportunities to feed the InfoSec side. And a lot of times there's overlap, for sure. But I think that overlap happened unconsciously, and we've never really thought it through. Like, I know some people who are fantastic hackers. I would never put them in a corporate InfoSec job, and vice versa. I mean, they are sort of different people.
Yep. So I think we can be happy we've got DEF CON feeding the hacker spirit. And I really like the idea of getting more visibility into defense to strengthen the feedback loop for defenders, because they need it. It was a really nice idea. I think about how we can implement it. Because yeah, that explains actually the problem.
Yeah, because you go like this. You look at your dashboard. The CEO looks at his dashboard, and what does the dashboard say for how many things you defended against? And if you're in a company, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. And so one of the only things that I hear as a metric that people measure is time to remediate. The time you notice the intrusion to the time you think you've kicked them out of your network. Like, you can measure that. And so they'll say, well, it takes us a month. Then it took us 3 weeks. Then it took us 2 weeks. Now it's a week. Now, and they have a goal. They know that they'll never get to a day because that's too expensive.
Boring.
Yeah, but what else do you measure in defense? Well, we were attacked by robots 1 million times. Well, is that a lot or a little? Are the robots happy or sad? Like, that doesn't mean anything. Where on offense, as a red team, you can say, well, we had the engagement and we succeeded 3 different ways. Right?
Yeah, actually, I think the way that I see that companies are trying to approach it is building purple teaming exercises, where the red team and blue team both have full visibility after the exercise into their actions, so the blue team can see what the red team did and how they defended. Yeah, this is exactly
that's where the value
we're looking
is.
for.
If you don't have like the DevSecOps mindset, if you don't have security people in your development team, you're in trouble. And the other part, I think, is that if you're not always thinking about how to make things less complicated, how do you simplify things? You get in a situation where your network and your environment is so complicated, it takes teams and teams of people to even understand what's going on. And there's a saying that the complex systems fail in unpredictable ways. And so we have to be okay with systems failing, and we will never understand why it failed. It might become impossible for us to understand, and your management needs to know that. Government, you have to be okay with complicated systems failing. And at the root of every complicated system, like, a complicated system just doesn't get born. It's not just born complicated. It starts as a very simple system, and it develops. It gets optimized, and then it becomes complicated. It's like, you look at the first moon mission. It was like sheet metal and duct tape and some rockets. And then you look at the latest launches, and they're super high tech, right? They're built on simple systems, and they get complicated over time. Same thing with cloud, right? And so I think at some point, hackers want to know how things work, and it will become impossible for hackers to understand that if systems get ever more complicated. And when that happens, you just kind of have to give up. It's so hyper complicated. I need to be with a team of 50 people. I think I want to go hack on a pacemaker. That's so much more simple.
We're getting closer to the end of the conversation. I really wish we had more time, but there's one more thing that's actually worrying me when I look at, I'm a journalist every day, and I never fear I will not have a topic to cover, because there will be always new attacks and new victims, and it will go on and on and on and on till I retire, or I never retire. And aren't you afraid the bad guys are winning?
Well, the bad guys are always winning. I can't think of a time when the bad guys. Well, no. I mean, bad guys can always win because they can choose the time and the place and the resources, and so they can win a battle. But I don't know if they can always win the war. And so that's why I tell people who are new to security that you have to think of this as, putting on my InfoSec hat, you have to think of this as you're a doctor and you're fighting cancer. You get up every day, you go and you fight cancer. You don't tell yourself that you're going to cure cancer, because if you tell yourself that, you're going to be a miserable person for your whole career, right? You're not going to succeed, and it's going to be really harmful to your psyche. But if you're like, hey, I'm getting in the trenches every year, and I'm making progress, I'm part of this team, and it's the same exact thing for security. You're not going to win, but what you're trying to do is manage the disease, just like anything else. You're trying to flatten it here, add 2-factor there, push the adversary over into this corner, rise the cost of attack, so now you can focus on fewer attackers. Those fewer attackers might be better resourced, but now you've squelched out a lot of the noise. So now you can really focus. And so that's what you're trying to do. And I had some friends, are very smart, optimistic people that came into the security world. And they said, in about 5 to 10 years, I'm not going to be in security because we're going to have solved it, right? We're going to have provable security. We're going to have trusted environments, trusted execution environments. Everything is going to be, correct. It's like, I don't know. A lot of smart people have been in this area since the 50s and we're still around, and now we're in the 90s. So I don't know. And here we are, right? And then about 12 years later, he said, I was completely wrong. It's never going away. Because even if all computers were 100% secure, you would still have physical security problems. You would have business logic problems. You would have account takeover problems. You'd have CEO impersonation problems. You'd still have a whole host of problems. So even if your computer was secure, you're still in trouble.
So I'd say it's an optimistic conclusion to end with. We'll all have jobs looking into the future, and our children and our grandchildren, etc.
Yeah, so I would say we're employment for life. Get used to working with other people and pace yourself. Right? It's not a race. We're in this for the long haul.
Jeff, thank you a lot for this conversation, and keeping our finger crossed for this year's DEF CON and for the next edition, and hope to see you again in person this time.
I hope to see you one day.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you guys very much for your conversation. I was supposed to go to the collision to see Jeff live during the talk. I was supposed to go last year, this year, but it didn't happen. I hope that in the future I will be able to travel. I'm waiting for my second shot of vaccination, and then we will see what the future brings.
I just got my second shot today.
So mine is on the 7th of June, so it's not too far, and I think that it will be better then. Thank you guys for it. It was like a great end of the first day of OMH conference. Of course, we have the second day and CTF in front of us, but thank you very much for the time you spent with us. And Jeff, thank you for accepting the invitation to the OMH conference, and I hope that we will see each other in the future.
Thank you for having me.